A man ekes out a living in rural North Idaho at a time when America is being transformed by the sweat and blood of men like him. Everything in this new world means very little to him, though, when weighed against two equally modest lives, the wife and child he had and lost.
The movie is called Train Dreams. This podcast is called All Those Moments. I'm Benji Wade.
And I'm Luke Baumgarten.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
All Those Moments is a podcast built around connecting social, political, or cultural moments with moments from our favorite movies. And Luke, we have an incredibly special guest here with us today.
He's sitting between us through the magic of television. It's star of page and screenplay, best-selling novelist, Obama-anointed short story scribe, hometown hero, and I'm beyond touched to say my friend, Jess Walter. Thanks for coming, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. feel like I'm in the right in the middle of this vortex of genius. It's impressive.
Oh God!
So, yeah,
people. Yeah, one other person has been caught in the vortex. Let's see if he can escape.
Yeah, all right.
Does Jess know Inga?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Inga's great.
We inflicted our asses on Inga once upon a time. I would actually describe us as not a vortex of geniuses, but more like a Tesla coil of fucking dorks.
Yeah,
so
I could see that.
So that's where you are, Jess.
And I'm sure Inga left you both in the dust. She's brilliant.
She absolutely did, without the benefit or aid of a bunch of notes and computers and stuff. She just
Much
kind
like
of off the cuff was just telling us where we were wrong about things.
I understand.
I'm going to tee you guys up to have a conversation because you have a friendship. Luke knows way more about you, Jess, than I do. I'm a relative newcomer to Spokane, but I just want to say this. I said it the other day when we watched Train Dreams together that I have a crush on you. Oh. And a lot of it is because of your book, The Cold Millions, that came out in the very heart of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I also met you probably, what do you think it was, Luke, 10 years ago at a party of you and Ginger's?
Yeah, oh, really? So. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh?
And I just felt like you were the humblest, most chill dude. And I kept thinking to myself, why is he so humble and chill? He's Jess Walter.
That was probably someone else.
You really fooled him.
That does not sound like me at all. I have like a Saddam body double that I send out to exude humility. Yeah.
Basically, every time we've even broached the subject of having a guest, your name's crossed my mind.
Awesome.
Just because of how much I know you love movies. And the wait was worth it because this film, for a number of reasons, feels really close to so much of the work you've done in your life and just being from Spokane. So we watched this film, Train Dreams, which is based on a really beautiful novella, mostly set in North Idaho, the area around Bonner's Ferry. History is so alive in many of your works, it becomes a character. And that's very much what this movie and novel was about. So yeah, I mean, second only to Denis Johnson himself. I can't imagine a better person to have on this.
Yeah, which would be that'd be an amazing get from the grave.
Yeah, from the grave, yeah.
We tried.
Yes,
we tried.
I'm sure.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about craft and being both a novelist and somebody who's written screenplays. But before we get to that, some bio that I didn't even know as I was sort of looking at your career through the lens of screenwriter. You grew up in the Spokane Valley, and you told me it was like a working class kind of union household. Did you grow up thinking you wanted to be a reporter and eventually a writer, or what was you?
You know, I definitely wanted to be an NBA point guard first. Right. And then, but yeah, from the time I was 8 years old, I had a little magazine in my family called Reader's Indigestion, kind of like Reader's Digest. And my sister and brother were reporters. I was the editor. And so we played writer as a kid. And around 12 or 13, I was reading so many books. I thought I want to write novels one day.
Oh, wow.
We also, when I was in fifth grade, we moved right next to the East Trent Drive-In Theater. Okay. And so from my tree fort, I watched both the greatest cinema, the person who ended up buying that theater would play Woody Allen movies.
Oh, wow.
Midnight Express and Dog Day Afternoon.
Hell yeah.
I'm watching these 70s auteurs, but I'm also watching Kentucky Fried Movie and House of 1001 Pleasures, like softcore porn.
Kentucky Fried Movie, that's John Landis, right?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I think it's given a cinematic quality to my fiction, but it's also embedded these two things in my mind. There's a place where they intersect screenwriting and writing literary fiction that is, for me, the sweet spot. It's so hard to hit. And that's why I was so interested to see this movie, because this is a film whose images play, a novella whose images play in your mind in such a way that I was like, how are we going to capture this?
Well, I'm glad you said it, because people don't always love the cinematic as an adjective to describe like books and writing all the time, but that's how I think of my writing. And I think it's one of the reasons that I really connected with yours as quickly as I did.
I felt like I got to see a proto version of Train Dreams by reading The Cold Millions. And when I say, folks, that I read The Cold Millions, I listened to it. Like any self-respecting person would do in the year 2020, doing like chores and yard work during the pandemic. And I listened to the audiobook version of it, which was exquisitely produced.
Yeah, they did an amazing job. And I'm a on the page first person, but when I'm reading, what I'm doing is the same thing you're doing when you're listening. I am playing that music in my head, seeing those images. So when people say, "Oh, I didn't read the book I listened to," I say, "Yeah, you read it. It's the exact same mental process."
Totally.
So you started your career at the Spokesman. A lot of reporters go on to be novelists and screenwriters. The vast majority do not. Like, what did you find in your time at the Spokesman that made you think, I could do this?
At the time, I felt like going to get my MFA, my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, was the path to being a novelist, which is a really limited, short way to look at it, because in the long history, going back to Hemingway and Stephen Crane, there are far more novelists who come out of journalism. And to this day, now as journalism has kind of died down, has lost its footing in the culture, that's a much harder path. But I don't think just being a journalist would lead you there. I think you have to, during that time, I was also getting every reading list and syllabus from anyone I knew who was either teaching in a creative writing program or taking those classes, and was in a very much an autodidact. I was giving myself the very education I thought I would have. So added to the fact that I was essentially creating my own 8-year MFA program, sending out short stories. When you add journalism to that, I think it gives me this incredible advantage that if I had only gone the MFA route, or that I wouldn't have. So, the curiosity, the chops to write, the ability to research, all those things are just so many people come out of creative writing programs and kind of write about their childhood over and over, or their parents over and over. And the outward looking nature of being a journalist, I think, was the greatest thing that could happen to me.
That research element is really intriguing to me in the context of Train Dreams, because Robert Grenier, similar to characters in The Cold Millions, many characters, based on a real person, but it's unclear to me, and I may be stepping on a future part of the conversation, but I feel like this is as good a context as any to talk about it. Like, what on earth was Denis Johnson up to with this Robert Grenier character? How much did he know, and how much was just ended up being a composite of all these laborers that came out of the early 20th century West?
Yeah, I mean, I think for The Cold Millions, my research was a lot more embedded in telling this big story. My understanding of Train Dreams. So Denis Johnson lived up near Bonners Ferry for a while, and when I met him, that's where he was living, and it's very much a place of bumping into your neighbors and hearing stories. And so you imagine hearing about a guy who lives in a cabin, who's lived there since the early part of the 20th century, and imagine the change you see in that life, and that's reflected in the novella, and then again in the film, in such a great matter-of-fact way. Like all of a sudden there's a chainsaw on the logging camp, and And so I think it was more hearing this story and then that activating his fiction writer's brain in a way. I don't get the sense that he thought, this is not a biopic. This is not the story of this person's life. Denis Johnson's a much more impressionistic writer than that.
Sure.
You're not going to look at his landscapes and say, oh, that's exactly what that looks like. You're going to see the brushstrokes and and what he's really writing about is time. And that's what I was so curious about when we went to see the film was I've adapted enough and been adapted enough to know that there's such different forms that things are going to have to change. And it's going to be hard for me as a lover of this novella to let go of things.
Yeah, totally.
But if I come away with the same feeling, if I come away with this idea of the mystery of time and of grief and all those things, then in many ways, you've created, I think, a good adaptation.
And kind of the poetry and instability of memory.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think if there's anything, I really love what you just said about the novella and the film, and where I find perfect harmony between the two is that neither Denis Johnson nor Clint Bentley were just going to call balls and strikes about some person's life. Right. There were brush strokes, to use the impressionist. It's like a naturalism. It was impressionistic. Right. And it's like, we're going to give you a kind of flutter of memories that we think we can attribute to this character to tell this very rich story. And
I think in both cases, pushing against the usual demands of that medium. Yeah. Like to write fiction, you think of how it's a really minimalist book. It's 105 pages or something. Yeah. And
small pages too.
Yeah. And to tell, and you're going to say, I'm going to tell this whole person's life in 105 pages. That's such a minimalist sketch that you're creating. And so how are you going to create such a depth of emotion in that small space? Now, the filmmakers, we're not going to give you chronology, which in cinema is we sort of take for granted. Yeah. We're going to have things sort of in it. Things are going to come in and out of time. And so that's what makes something challenging. Mm-hmm. Also often turns out to be the thing that you come away with the most moved by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing that kind of springboarded you from reporter to book writer was your coverage of the Ruby Ridge standoff, which you're somewhere between like 15 and 30 miles from the setting of this book, if that. Yeah. From Ruby Ridge, where the Weaver compound was, and that whole thing. That was the source material for your first book, which was originally called Every Knee Shall Bow, and now is called The Weaver?
Just called Ruby Ridge.
Ruby Ridge, yeah. It also apparently, which I did not know until I was doing this research, was your first screenwriting credit.
Yeah, I was. It was made into a miniseries in 1996 with Laura Dern, Kirsten Dunst, Randy Quaid, and I did not write the screenplay, but then they brought me in to give it a pass, essentially. Okay. Yeah. And so I think I'm an executive producer and a script consultant, I think is my official.
Yeah. Executive producer is usually the one where they go, we don't know where else to put you.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, how else can we get you some money? So, but since then that kind of launched my screenwriting career. And I'm like a lot of screenwriters have sold more than things haven't been produced, but
you've sold,
but I actually have a really high batting average. I think I'm like 7 of 8 in the scripts I've written have been sold, which is pretty remarkable. I've adapted my own stuff 4 or 5 times, and I've got 2 things right now out in the world that are adaptations that I've written that I'm hoping to get made. So, but you're always hoping to get things made. For sure. It's really hard for people because they'll announce, they're about to make the announcement on So Far Gone. And when they do, people say, congratulations, when's it going to be on the air?
Yeah, exactly.
And I say, sometime between next November and never.
Yeah, there's like 37 steps between when they actually order the...
No, it is like signing up for a hurdles race, and they don't tell you how long the race is, how many hurdles there are, if there happen to be crocodiles, and you're just running. And but I've come to kind of be okay with that process. Like you work with great people, and the things can just take forever. I don't know how many times you see a film and you find out that it's been in pre-production for 12, 15 years.
So what I would love to do is just a kind of snapshot of more or less like what your expectations were going in versus like how they were met. Let's start with you, Jess.
I suppose the difficult thing for me was, again, going in with one of your favorite pieces of writing and knowing that there are going to be diversions. Yeah. And so you sort of steel yourself for those. And then, watching a few kind of anachronistic mistakes in the movie, which as a writer, you're going to notice, or, some clunky things. And the one that we talked about was early on, it talks about how he'd made it all the way to Helena. And then later in dialogue, it says he's never been to Montana. And I'm like, who who in North Idaho's never bumped? I mean, you accidentally end up in Montana if you live in North Idaho.
But go for a long walk.
But that was a tiny thing. But I think the most jarring thing for me, and it's right, I'm just going to read the very first sentence of the book. Because I think this is the very first moment I was like, all right, I'm going to be ready for changes. So it starts this way. In the summer of 1917, Robert Grenier took part in an attempt on the life of a Chinese laborer caught, or anyway accused of, stealing from the company stores of the Spokane International Railway in the Idaho Panhandle. And that's almost like a nonfiction beginning, but he took part in it. Now, if you remember in the film, he's friends with the guy, and he doesn't make much of an effort to stop him, but he tries to stop him.
Sure.
In the novella, the character gets away, and because they can't, but he's got a leg. He's part of it.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
His regret is built of something totally different here.
Yeah.
And I know why they made that change, because you're trying to get a 21st century audience to like a character.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And so from the very beginning, I have to say, I was like, oh, I'm not going to like this, because they're going to,
It's also very odd because usually filmmaking does the media res thing of
starting
in action. And so for a novella to start that way and for the movie to go a completely different direction was very surprising.
When that happened, I thought, oh, they're doing the likability thing. And it breaks my heart when Hollywood does the likability thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, as the film went on, a lot of that went away, because I found myself in the same, having, as I said, those exact same feelings when I, in the end, I thought they had done just a beautiful adaptation of a work that I love. And that's where you always end up when you love a book and the film comes out. You have to separate them and say, I think the biggest example for me is American Fiction, which is based on maybe one of my favorite novels of all time, Erasure by Percival Everett. And in the end, I'm like, that's a good version and that's a good version. And you have to let them live separately.
Yeah.
So I think that was my main impression was after I got over the places where you're just like, that's not right.
Yeah.
In the novel, he's skinny, like Joel Edgerton's never going to, Joel Edgerton doesn't look like he's lived in the woods.
He's a beefcake.
Looks like he's been eating pretty well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I think if you haven't read the book, you don't bring that to it. So you're kind of bringing in a backpack that you have to take off at some point and just allow yourself to be. And I thought Joel Edgerton I thought he did really a great job in the film. And so getting past that physical thing and, because what you're going to find an actor who's going to lose 52 pounds and half his teeth, there
aren't that many of those left.
Right.
Jeremy Strong was taken.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
Christian Bale was preoccupied.
Right. Yeah,
exactly.
So I used to be more pretentious about that sort of thing too. And I think at some point,
oh, you're calling me pretentious?
No,
totally.
No, the idea of like, this is my favorite book, so the movie is like going to be a pale imitation. And I think at some point I just got over that. But also, I think I love movies too much and books to like. They feel like different things. Obviously, there's the source material is the same, but like
you have to allow them to be different things. And I'll tell you, everyone would experience that if they had to watch their book being adapted, which I've had to watch.
Of course.
And then you get these things back. The screenwriter for So Far Gone just turned in his draft. It's so great. And in fact, he thought of something. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? So you have to allow them to be different things, but I don't think it's pretension at all. I think it's in fact the thing you get from a book that a film sometimes can't do, and vice versa.
Totally. In this book, the world is happening so like all around him, so much change is happening. But like you were saying, Benji, when he's in his cabin, time is literally frozen. And then he goes to Bonner's Ferry. You're like halfway through the movie before we see a car. And then I contrasted that with like The Cold Millions, and where it's mostly set in Spokane, or it's like logging camps in eastern Montana. Probably the train ride to get to, Taft, Montana or whatever, probably went through Bonner's Ferry and maybe up that bridge that Robert Grenier literally builds in part of this book and movie. Time was dilated in such interesting ways in that era. Like your book starts 10 years before, 10 years, your book mostly takes place 10 years before this book even starts.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What about you, Benji?
I knew the novella I read it because I read it like 3 weeks ago in a single sitting. Didn't intend to do that. Very difficult for me to do that as a severely ADHD person who has a smartphone. This new thing that came out a few years ago.
You might have heard of them.
God.
I don't think Robert gets one in the film.
He doesn't.
No, that's the only piece of technology he actually does get. Yeah.
He goes to the Apple store and gets confused. But I read it in a single sitting, sobbed over the last 5 pages.
Yeah.
Wasn't even clear why.
Yeah.
But whatever Denis Johnson was attempting to do in a little over 100 pages, he accomplished it with me. I did not know any of the films of either Clint Bentley or Greg Quaid, the producing and
screenwriting.
Writing
There's one. What are
partners.
their films? There's one that I
Jockey and Sing Sing.
Sing Sing is an incredible
Sing Sing's
film.
great.
Yeah.
And very different. I mean,
So
Totally.
Yeah.
I think they accomplished what they set out to do. I would also say, and Jess, your descriptions of your writing about Spokane made me think about this too. And it's topical and top of mind for me because our professional soccer team is in a championship for the second year in a row.
Yeah.
Shout out Velocity FC. But it made me feel proud of Spokane and our friends here in the filmmaking community who helped make it. And to me, I think it's likely the best film of its kind that's ever been produced in the region. A kind of, what would I call it? Like a prestige drama, historic film. It's very earnest. It's very sweet. It's filled with lots of loss, but probably just as much love about nature, about people, about the way that a kind of kinship can be struck under the very worst circumstances imaginable for human beings. And a preview of my thoughts that I think will be sort of fleshed out over the course of this conversation, a random post I came across on Twitter. I was searching for takes. I found a couple clips from Clint Bentley and the cinematographer Adolfo Veloso. This is from a person named Del Winters, has 13 followers and has been on Twitter for 3 months. Del, I don't know what you're doing on Twitter, but I loved what you had to say. Train Dreams is a remarkable movie about an unremarkable man. Robert Grenier is haunted by a tragedy so complete to him, yet so trivial to a world that just keeps chugging along. How many lives were ground to dust under the engine of progress to build this country? That's better than the log line from Rotten Tomatoes. I would be more likely to watch Train Dreams based on his description.
He's on to a big, to one of the reasons I was sort of scared about that opening scene, because he talks about the fact that there's an environmental side to this, and so it's really important in the novella that Robert is involved in trying to throw this guy off the train bridge, because he's also involved in cutting down the trees. He's a tiny cog in this huge machine, and so those two regrets are intertwined. He's not really haunted by in the novella, and in the film he is haunted by the ghost of the man who in the novella they try to throw off the bridge and he gets away. In the film, I won't say what happens, but he's haunted by that ghost. He's also haunted by the fact that this modernity that comes to sweep over the land he has had a part in. And so I think unraveling him from responsibility for this brutal act of racist vengeance also unravels a little bit his the other thing. And so that was my first but I think, again, you come away with that same feeling, which to me makes it as a different kind of success.
Yeah, by the end of the film.
I'm going to do a little bit of who did this, a little bit of tiny bit of background, and I'll go quickly. Director Clint Bentley made his first feature film in 2021. It was called Jockey. It starred Clifton Collins. Clifton Collins has a cameo in this movie. Jockey was shot by cinematographer Adolfo Veloso, who also shot Train Dreams. Bentley is also a writing and producing partner of Greg Quaid, the director of the highly acclaimed 2023 A24 movie, Sing Sing. Sounds like both of you have seen Sing Sing. I need to see it. Bentley and Quaid also co-wrote Train Dreams. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Greg, if you ever listen to this podcast. What else have they made? I have not seen any of these movies, by the way. Veloso's career is taking off, though. He just finished shooting M. Night's latest movie, which is called Remain. Here is the log line from the internet, aka Rotten Tomatoes, about what happens. And then from here out, folks, we will spoil the hell out of this movie. This is not a podcast you should be listening to or watching if you have not seen Train Dreams. You will probably get very little out of it. We'll also spoil the book. I think it's inevitable. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I really want to talk to this man about that book quite a bit. And you, Luke, obviously.
It's the kind of book too. If you're spoiled by the plot or something, you're not really. That's the reason to read this book.
So true.
Because it does have a Reservoir Dogs ending where everyone shoots
there's a
each
whole
other.
Mexican standoff. It's really crazy.
11 people die.
You don't see it coming.
He dies. He dies at the end. You're never gonna believe it. But this main character dies at the end. Based on the beloved novel Novella by Denis Johnson, Train Dreams is the moving portrait of Robert Grenier or Grenier. What are we saying,
It's
folks?
funny. I think in the film it's
said Grenier.
Grenier, yeah. Which is funny. It's very much
French.
Well, it's very much the way Trapper French gets turned
into weird English.
Right. Yeah. Ponderay and Coeur d'Alene are not, it's very much the same thing happens to French in the Bayou, I always want to say Grenier because I took French and stupidly in high school, but I think it's Grenier.
My favorite version of this is living in Southern Illinois, going to grad school at Southern Illinois University. And there's a nearby town, which has an incredibly rich history, by the way. I hope somebody makes a movie about it someday, called Cairo.
Oh, okay. Cairo, yes.
Cairo, or there's like DeCoin, like all these French terms just get flattened. It's really funny. Grenier, I'm going to say Grenier because I think it's stuck to me right now. It's played by Joel Edgerton, whose life unfolds during an era of unprecedented change in early 20th century America. Orphaned at a young age, Robert grows into adulthood among the towering forests of the Pacific Northwest, where he helps expand the nation's railroad empire alongside men as unforgettable as the landscapes they inhabit. After a tender courtship, he marries Gladys, played by Felicity Jones, and they build a home together, though his work often takes him far away from her and their young daughter, Kate. When his life takes an unexpected turn, Robert finds beauty, brutality, and newfound meaning for the forests and the trees that he has felled. It's directed by Clint Bentley, shot by Adolfo Veloso, music by Bryce Dessner of The National, edited by Parker Laramie, visual effects by a couple of my friends, Jason McKee and Travis Berry, and a ton of our friends in the local filmmaking community were involved. So shout out Washington Film Commission, North by Northwest, Spokane Film Project, many more people that I won't name on this podcast because there's probably countless of them. That's this movie that we're about to talk about. And I think it's time to unpack the moments from the movie. The way that we do this, Jess, is we're going to do kind of it's not beat by beat. We try to do this in a fairly condensed fashion, but it gives us an opportunity to point out things that we recall, tie in sort of the thematic material. We can make comparisons to Denis Johnson's novella. And then we'll also incorporate some of the feedback we got from the audience that we watched the movie with. So you brought this up early on, Jess, but Luke discovered something about the narrator of this movie. Will Patton plays the role of the narrator, which is, I think, the de facto voice of Denis Johnson. Is that fair to describe?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot more to say about narration, so we'll let that stand for now.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. He's describing the character of Robert Grenier like on the very first moments of the movie, but it's already out of sync with the novella 10 seconds into the movie.
But I agree. It very much takes the place of the narration quality of a novel.
His name was Robert Grenier, and he lived more than 80 years in and around the town of Bonners Ferry, Idaho.
So the thing about that narration that I did want to talk about right now is basically he's portraying Grenier as a man from nowhere, no family, lands in this place under no volition of his own as a child and just sticks there. Mm-hmm. Did that mean anything to y'all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes to have an unmoored. I mean, if you start with a character with no past, you've got Clint Eastwood riding into town. It's I mean, it's very much a simple way to have this character embody symbolic things and but it also, kind of connotes like this. It was such a wild place. You could just be sort of born into existence without knowing your parents or even how old you are. Yeah. It's a little bit of a fable in a way, and that's what that storytelling quality does. That's what that narration does. It establishes things and it establishes a tone. Will Patton's voice is so perfect. It's got a little bit of like Midwestern corn in it and just a little dusty 100%. Quality.
And you discovered that
that he did the audio
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
He read the, and I was thinking Will Patton, totally perfect for this. He's like when you don't want to go full Sam Elliott, you call
Right.
Will
Yeah.
Patton.
No, and Sam Elliott would have been
Way too
mannered.
Yeah.
Like this is much more matter of fact.
Yep.
It was a perfect choice, I thought.
And Will Patton's also very much in sync with a filmmaker we've talked a lot about recently because we just talked about one of her movies, Kelly Reichardt. So he did, or he was one of the main characters in Meek's Cutoff. So he feels perfectly coded to do this.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a great choice.
And we talked about another narrated film that I think we both love, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And if you read the novel, there's quite a bit more narration in that film in a way that if for a moment has you feel like you're watching a documentary, which establishes the bona fides of that movie so profoundly that when Brad Pitt starts becoming Jesse James, and in I think one of the great performances of all time, Casey Affleck invents can I swear on here?
Of course.
Invents the character of the Starfucker as Robert Ford.
Right.
If Jesse palavered with another person, Bob secretaried their dialogue, getting each inflection, reading every gesture and tick, as if he wanted to compose a biography of the outlaw, or as if he were preparing an impersonation.
It's like you're seeing something come out of, like his history's first Starfucker,
It's I'm so glad you said that because this is the part, and I realize we're already into the adaptation narration thing, which I'm just glad to just get it out of the way here. But that movie fucks with you with the narration because it's out of sync sometimes with what you're seeing, and it's asking questions about Western myth making of these larger than life figures. It's also asking questions about how the audience feels about Brad Pitt and his intertext as a Hollywood star, and he's going through the Brangelina period of his life and being covered by tabloids, and the narration is like it's tabloidish by the middle of it,
because that was the invention of the tabloid. People writing novels about Billy the Kid and Jesse James. So it really fits. And it's interesting if you write screenplays and you turn something in with a narrator, the very first note you'll get from every producer is take the narration out. It's seen as lazy, and as if you can't show it, then don't
tell it.
And which is funny because every time it's in a film, I love it. I mean, I could, the Royal Tenenbaums, I could just have that narration my whole life. I would love to just walk around having that narration.
But it's part of the oral tradition that I think is so celebrated in this movie too, which we've talked about.
The thing I've realized with narration when I use it in screenplays is it can't be expository. You actually can't tell any part of the story that matters. And so you can set up the story, which is what happens here. He sets up the story and then it disappears for long periods of time. And then it comes back. And so what does narration actually stand in for here? Time. Every time it comes in, a long period of time has passed. And so that's its job. Its job is not to tell you how Robert feels or anything like that, but just it picks up when he goes to Spokane and rides on the plane, when he goes to and so that's kind of its job, is to be a sort of transition into another time period. And I thought, and in that way, I thought it was beautiful. I never thought it was overused. I was
they don't,
so
because
grateful for it.
They don't use titles. That came up in the audience feedback, and that's something that we can reflect on a little bit more later too. But there's no use of titles to say 1918 and now it's 1940.
And thank God, because again, it's impressionistic. And in Robert Grainier's life, he doesn't get titles. He just lives these moments, and the moments come to him in memory and in grief out of order.
Well, especially for that period that is like the end of his life is so marked by this sort of endless grief. If you did get the 1917 is when he decided to, you would lose that, like just the indeterminacy of that all those different time periods makes it feel like, this was an eternity to him and a lifetime.
Right. And it all bled into itself.
Totally. Yeah.
It's interesting. You talked about the wife, and one of the challenges of writing minimalism is there's almost, if you go back to the novella, there's almost nothing about the relationship. She's there. So they have to invent some scenes that show this incredible intimacy between them. This character is like the age of my grandpa. And it's hard for me to imagine those intimate scenes between my grandma and grandpa.
Yeah.
Can I come back to that, Jess? Because that's a whole topic that I think has to be explored.
Sure.
Before we get out of the opening moments of the movie, though, I do just want to say there's something that occurs early on that becomes part of this text that is impossible to not talk about. In the novella, there's a Chinese worker that Robert Grainier's working with that is first kind of treated inhumanely and threatened with death. They're trying to shoot at him and kill him.
Right.
But he survives and escapes. But Robert's a participant in it. In the movie, he gets kicked away quickly and is no longer a participant, and then is just a witness to a totally barbaric act of...
And says, why are you doing this? And
Yes.
What did he do?
And he gets kicked trying to intervene, not because he's helping.
Not because he's helping.
Right, yeah.
Yes. And it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
And then he gets the Chinese worker gets thrown from the bridge. It happened so quickly that I missed it watching the movie.
The first time. Yeah.
My wife is telling me later, she's like, yeah. And then they threw the Chinese worker. That was so awful. And I was like, huh?
So if you're going to take away the fact that Robert went along with the mob initially, then having him not get away is a really stark way. And so I understood as a screenwriter, I was like, I can imagine getting that note from the producers saying, can we have him try to intervene?
Right.
And I don't know that was a note that the screenwriters got, but I can understand why they did that. And again, you don't want something so jarring at the beginning that the film now becomes about that.
This is the time probably to speak about the observation you're making about the portrait of the relationship. It is definitely something the second time watching it, but I mean, their relationship is portrayed as being fiercely intimate. The beard stroking, the say my name.
There's a plainness about it. And you talked about how she apparently doesn't leave the cabin while they're gone. Well, he's going to church is where he meets her, and her family's in that area. And this is not in the novella. Again, this is the genius of minimalism, and then it makes it hard to make that in the film. But she would be going to dinner at her family's house. She would be going into town, and so you have to set that stuff aside and say, what were the filmmakers trying to create? And they have to create that intimacy so we know what we lost. You also know that when you cast a well-known actress, you got to give her something to do.
Yes. She is portrayed, though, of having a ton of masculine energy. Yeah. And Robert is portrayed as having a lot of feminine energy.
Yeah, she's really assertive. And she's the one who initiates the relationship in the film.
Yes, she shoots the gun.
Yeah.
She's suggesting ways that they can get out of the situation that they found themselves caught in, where he doesn't get to spend time with his daughter.
She's willing to go to a log camp or to
with a bunch of disgusting men.
Right.
Yeah.
This is one of the ways in which I think the thematic parts of the film are impressionistic, the way that the actual stuff, like the way it's filmed is impressionistic. This is the first moment when the Chinese worker is thrown off the bridge, and there's a lot of like creature song and insects in this movie, like when they're out in the woods and when they're in the logging camp, there's always the crackle of a fire because it's nighttime. There's a lot of sound design in this movie. And whenever, a couple different times for different reasons, when Grainier experiences something that truly shocks and like freaks him out,
like trauma,
it'll like the next scene is a hard cut to just like the stand of trees and complete silence. Like, man, when he's alone, when he's walking back through those woods after having seen this it's like, there is nobody but him and his head, And I thought it was pretty intense.
Totally agree. And because we keep talking about, well, it's different than the novella this way. This is what I mean about saying, well, how are we going to get that feeling across? Yeah. And you mentioned the word quiet and the times of quiet, there's not some soaring violin music in the back. It's the sound of the woods, or it's just the sound of your own kind of solitude. Yeah. And that's what I think is such a triumph here, is that, again, all these changes, and yet I come away with the same feeling I had from the novella.
This is where I think Joel Edgerton does such a great job of selling that interiority of Robert Grainier. The camera rack focuses from Grainier's profile to the Chinese worker, and it's the first time he's haunted by his memory.
Right.
And you're immediately like, oh shit. In fairness, if they had gone right off the page from the novella and the Chinese worker had gotten away, I think a lot of the audience might have been like, what the hell's this guy's problem?
Yeah.
The dude got away.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right?
not that big of a deal.
It's so much more nuanced in the novella. But anyway, let's talk about what happens next in the story. Robert returns to Gladys after his railroad job, where he it's made mention that it's the first time he ever did a railroad job, and it was going to be his last because he hated it. Robert and Gladys have a baby because there's a shot where that character is introduced. They have dogs at this point, and like, can a dog pup live on its own?
That the solitude of that place, the combination of the beauty of it, and then you feel that solitude so much that when a dog shows up, you're kind of thrilled for everyone involved.
Right.
You know? So
And of course, the filmmakers can't help but sort of show their hand a little bit with, don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to be her daddy.
Yeah.
And as a person in the audience, you're just kind of like, fuck, here, great.
That's
Yeah.
foreshadowing.
Yep, great. It's at this point we are introduced to the whole logging environment. The characters that he's in this environment with are all described, including Billy, who made his home in the trunk of a tree. There's Apostle Frank, this nonstop yapping about the Bible character that reminded me a little bit of something out of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? There's a man that shows up in camp. It's from one fixed camera angle, which I thought was really
from
cool.
a real distance too.
A lot happening in the foreground, the background. That like Velosa was using every ounce of this deep focus to reveal what happens in the scene. It's a black character who walks in. All these 100% white men, loggers, thank you, are sitting around kind of chilling. And, you know, this guy shows up and says he's looking for this character, Buckskin Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as he says that name, the character that we've been told is Apostle Frank, this guy who won't stop talking.
Just yapping about the Bible.
Yapping about the Bible.
30 seconds.
Right.
Played by Paul Schneider, who's a great actor.
Yeah.
He just stands up and runs off, and immediately this black character pulls out a gun and shoots him in the back, and then walks up and basically, I'm going to TLDR this, but he's like,
Yeah.
that guy killed my brother, and
For nothing but the color of his skin.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if anybody has a problem with that, I'd rather not be like watching my back for the rest of my life.
That's
So, like,
right. And every character just kind of goes, nope.
Sits there, right.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Which you probably would say to a character with a gun. You probably wouldn't have a problem right then.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not sure what I make of this scene and why they put it in the movie, other than the likability thing, I guess.
And well, it's important to say this does not appear anywhere in the novella.
No,
right? Yeah,
no.
it's not. It's so. This is one of the few scenes that's totally invented, right? Or
Oh yeah, totally invented and a little hard to get your mind around too. It's like, all right, how does this guy find this log crew? How does he speak to all of them and wait till that guy runs away, and then how does he, like, maybe it's him, but if that's all you have for, I mean, it's all fine. It's all a little bit invented, and it's a kind of interesting scene, and it doesn't take away from the film. It almost feels like in the same way that you're haunted by that Chinese worker, it almost feels like a kind of strange dream sequence that's been interjected. But again, very much, I think of it as a sort of Tarantino moment where Django gets to burn down the house, or the Manson family gets killed by it's just a moment of like, yes, like there just a strange wish fulfillment kind of put in the middle. Like, look at that racist who also, when, he's very much like the street preacher when you're
cloaks
downtown.
himself as a man of God.
Right. Yeah. Look, the hypocrite got one in the back. And, we can all feel sort of better about ourselves.
Yeah.
And again, it's fine. But my take on moments like that is, in 1923 or whenever this was supposed to happen, the exact opposite happened all the time. Acts of violence against Black people that were not, and so it's nice for us to feel great about ourselves and that we're glad that this happened. But historically, are we losing something by pretending that a Black man could walk into a lumber camp, shoot someone, and
walk away? Yeah, it's like, on the one hand, moral relativism can be annoying, but on the other hand, this, I'm not sure, like, strange act of wish fulfillment is probably the most generous way to describe it. It felt odd in the movie. I think I would have found this moment odd had I not even read the novella. I can't really say that for sure.
I kind of appreciated its randomness. And that the way that was shot, sometimes really weird things happen. And it was like, this weird thing happened.
Remember that?
One of the most important people in Robert's life is Arn Peoples, who he may have met twice twice in his entire life.
Right.
And this might at a couple logging camps here and there. And this might be that's one of the 2 or 3 most important relationships this guy ever has in his life. And it made me think about like, these are itinerant people, whether they're, immigrants or not, they're coming from all over. There's this extended jag about like just talking shit about people from Minnesota. Basically, because they're so foreign to these people who are like.
I liked that the second time even more than the first. Yeah. It's so fucking funny. I have no idea why Arn is shitting on Minnesota people, but it's brilliant. Yeah.
I mean, it's, I don't know, almost felt like a throwback to, or like a nod to Fargo too, right? Because that's the other William H. Macy role. But it did strike me that, because there is so much randomness, there are a couple other moments we should probably talk about it a little bit later, but like there's like the way these men who've lived lives of such incredible solitude choose to interact with each other when they are in the, like there's that moment where somebody starts talking, just asks a simple question. And I don't even know if we know this character's name. The guy's like, it's quiet around him. One person on this crew asks a question and the guy gets up and he goes, isn't there anywhere on God's earth where a man can get some peace? It's you've probably just not been talking for hours while you're cutting logs and now you're done for the day. And you just don't even want to hear a single word.
I love that moment. Yeah. Reminded me of being around a big fire with my grandpa, built this big slash pile after working on his farm. And I was just talking. And he finally looked at me and said, go in the house with the women. You're talking too much. So that just felt very true to that. And that's what the minimalism does in the book. It's taciturn. It's quiet.
Yeah. We kind of stepped on our introduction of Arn Peoples a little bit.
We got to do that.
Yeah. He's the first description I read in the novella of Arn Peoples, I just immediately pictured William H. Macy and then discovered that he had been cast. It was amazing. It was hard not to picture him. And I had just watched the Elizabeth Holmes biopic on The Dropout. So maybe that was influencing it, even though he kind of looks like Homer Simpson on meth in The Dropout. But I kind of consider this character, he's an aging logger. He's supposed to be like William H. Macy. I assume William H. Macy's in his 60s or 70s.
Yeah, something like that.
But in logger years, he might as well be 130. Right? His body doesn't work anymore. Right. He's got lots of...
And neither does he, really.
Neither does he. Yes, exactly.
Definitely does not work anymore.
He operates in the space of like the Lorax a little bit of a Dr. Seuss character of he is like Robert. His actions are out of sync with his soul. Like he doesn't want to be cutting these trees down. And at one point he's singing a song when they're going to sleep and has a line in the song that he's singing to Robert as they're trying to go to sleep. If the Lord was a redwood, would you cut him down? You know, he does not love what they're doing with their lives.
Although if your first introduction is blowing up a hillside, it's hard to, he's
not exactly an environmentalist.
Right. No, I'm glad they didn't turn him into an environmentalist. I mean, this was the way to make a living.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that. But I also really appreciate his humor because I do think of William H. Macy as a comic actor, and yet the comedy comes just out of character, and it's very subtle, and it's funny in a way that still keeps the heartbreaking nature of the whole thing.
Robert doesn't say much at all, other than sort of declarative stuff. But he seems drawn to people with like a philosophical soul. Like his wife is talking about, she's a little bit more plain spoken about it, but is sort of interested in like what life is all about a little bit and talks with him a bit.
Don't touch that. Don't even look at it crossways.
Arn's very much that way. And then Claire, once we're going to meet her, she's just off to the races about these were glaciers and this is the world. And he doesn't do any of that. Like it's not back and forth, but you could tell he loves listening to people, and they do a really good job of characterizing this movie, like loves hearing people who have something to say about the nature of the world.
And I think that's so important because, again, look at the source material. You have a minimalist book with a taciturn character who doesn't say his feelings. So what are you showing? You're showing the things that registered in his life.
Yeah. Exactly. How he bounces off the people around him.
And so people are expressing things that he's incapable of expressing, but they land in his soul and then as the viewers. And that's what makes it so successful, even if you question certain decisions, that's what makes it so successful is you still get to watch a singular taciturn minimalist character, but then feel all the stuff that he feels in his relationships and especially in his relationship to the natural world, which is in the end what all those other characters are kind of commenting on too.
I want to get us into the section of the movie that I think is Clint Bentley at the peak of his powers as a filmmaker, along with the editor, cinematographer, everybody. You see a moment where a rogue log that they've cut down goes trundling down a hill and it kills 3 men and a couple horses. And there's this beautiful moment where they take the boots from this worker, which are really quick shout out for white boots, right, Luke?
Yeah, the film crew was totally outfitted
they go to
with
white
White's boots.
and
a friend of mine who's like friends of friends were like, hey, do you think we could get him in and send a photo that we should actually, I'll send it to you. There's this really awesome photo of
Joel Edgerton.
Joel Edgerton putting on a pair of these boots.
Wow.
And
nailing him to a tree.
This is a incredibly important beat and inflection point where there's a line of there's no end for the world's appetite for lumber. There's a character that says this. It's the foreman on the job who represents the companies that are going to benefit from this, including World War I. The war don't stop needing spruce just on account of a bad day for us. And this is where
so 3 people have just died and the foreman's explaining why they can't let him have the rest of the day out.
But he's also saying we need some way to remember them. To memorialize them.
It becomes one of the most important visual symbols of the movie.
And then to have the tree start to grow around the boots.
Moss starts to form.
Wow, that was just a marvelous.
It's so cool. And also little known fact about how trees work with this stuff, which I learned from a arborist recently, which is that when it's the damage you can do to a tree is not when you nail something into it. It's when you take it out. When you nail it in, it can grow around it. It'll probably heal just fine. But
it'll eat it essentially. The post from my kid's tree fort has been mostly swallowed up by the tree.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, which makes you feel strange about, how old your kids are.
Then there's a line from Will Patton, narrator, saying, Grenier worried that death would follow him here far away from where he wanted to be. It's the first moment where Robert feels fated, as he does so often, that he's going to die here, nowhere near his family. This is when I was describing this as a 20-minute maybe section of this film where I think that Bentley's at the peak of his powers. You get him coming home to his wife Gladys and his daughter Kate. She's now at that age as anybody who's had kids. I have 2 daughters. This is the part of the movie that completely fucked me up. I was sobbing watching this part the first time, and I wanted to cry, but you 2 were there and you'd make fun of me.
I would have comforted you. I would have held you.
But I want to start immediately with this line from Ginger once again, from our audience who watched this, about the Kate, the actor that played this young actor.
And then I also was so surprised by that child, Kate, the little, awesome. I don't know that they did the dynamic between the 3 of them and the scenes that they were able to get from her were really special.
Reminded me so much of my oldest daughter when she was very little, precocious, way too articulate, and could enunciate things in a way that was unsettling. Like, come here, the Kate character's like, come here, chicken. And Robert says, I feel like I'm missing her whole life. There's the magic hour photography. They have that scene where they're talking about Gladys saying, I would go to the lumber camp if it means that we can be together. And Robert's like, that's happened to exactly one person and it was a mess. And she's just like, and I think
more importantly, kind of like he's worried about dying in a lumber camp. He really doesn't want his wife and child. His concern is with her safety. He wants to be with her. And that's the conversation they're having. It's like, how can we be together more? She's like, I could come with you. And this is one of the really heartbreaking pieces of foreshadowing. She's like, no, like I don't want you to be in this place that's so unsafe.
And she says, I'm just trying to find a way is all. This is like a tense and sad meal. Because you can tell the foreshadowing is just like, is coming on thick at this point. And I think it's one of the great misdirects of the novella that is obviously done really well in this movie. You're worried about Robert's safety, right? Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. He says in response to that, it's a great piece of acting from Joel Edgerton. I know. He says it 3 times. Yeah. And then the narration comes in. Though he didn't know it then, he would always look back at this time in his life as his happiest. Even if you don't have kids, but you have families around you and you see kids and you know that there's so much impermanence to that period of life. It's just like, it's incredibly special. Yeah. And you could tell he's missing all of it to go fucking cut down trees.
Yeah.
So shitty.
Yeah.
And it's such a good example. It's not like a labor movie by any means. It's not even clear if any of these people are in a union or agitating for it. But it's like, this is such a life near subsistence that like they're trying to do as much as they can on the land, but it's just not enough by the 20s or whenever.
Yeah. No, it's so much more primitive than that.
Yeah.
Most beautiful passage, I think, in the film, it's Robert carrying Kate. You can hear the wolves in the background. We'll come back to the wolves.
Tired, Katie? You ready for bed, huh?
And I wrote, Jesus, this is heartbreaking. Yeah. Walking away, his daughter's back is turned in this last moment. He actually turns back. He's walking away from his home on his way back, on his way to return to this shitty life of logging. And he turns back because I think he wants to say goodbye one more time. And Gladys has Kate on the corner of their little tiny cabin, but Kate's got her back turned because that's what kids do. They don't know the
She's
stakes.
like looking at a flower or something.
No idea what's going on. And it's just so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then it's back to logging. And when it turns back to logging, I think we get some more of this doomed language of the narrator. One more long stint in the woods would be enough for Robert and Gladys to build a sawmill back home.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not happening.
Only if you've read the book.
Only if you read the book.
Or paid attention to the foreshadowing.
We then get Arn saying things like it's rough on not just the body, but the soul.
Logging.
You cut down these trees that have been here for 500 years. At one point, he's interacting with a local actor who I want to shout out. He's like, you Minnesota fellas don't know your history. Because there's this kid around the campfire when they're talking and Robert has returns to logging. And actor's name's Bo Charles, local kid. I think I'm pretty sure I've cast him in some stuff in the past for like Visit Spokane, maybe.
Yeah.
But he has this line where he's like, we could be cutting down trees for 1,000 years and come out here and be more. And
by the time we got done, there'd be growed up just as big as they were before.
There you go.
So it's like we could run through this whole continent and come back and start again for thousands of years. Yeah.
To me, the most effective sort of environmental moments are when we keep seeing that bridge with cars on it.
Yeah.
Because then we're getting the sense of this constant encroachment of civilization, which is hard to get when you have a character who lives along a stream out in the middle of nowhere. And so that idea that civilization is just, marching through the woods, it's almost best seen visually. And I could have even used more of that, and it's hard to show a clear cut, but that's what would have happened back then.
Oh, 100%.
They weren't replanting.
Right.
I want to tee up a comment from our friend Anne, who had something to say about this very thing.
A single line about how, as he was on the train, he saw the a wooden trestle bridge and and 10 years later, they made something out of concrete and steel and it made that obsolete. And just all of the sweat and blood and death that went into that bridge. 10 years go by and it's just obsolete.
With a stroke of a pen, that stuff would often disappear. This is another point where Arn's talking, has these great lines. And Macy's just so incredibly perfect in this movie that I think he carries a lot of the weight of this type of storytelling. And he says something to the effect of, he introduces the stakes for everybody, of course, including Robert, like, who do you have to go back to? And he brings up his family and his wife. And Arn says this very funny line, my family's anywhere. And he says it with a smiling face, except for Kansas.
Yeah.
And he shits on Kansas. So he's got problems with Kansas and Minnesota in this movie. If you've made it this far, spoilers. But this is the moment where we're introduced to the concept of a widowmaker branch.
Yeah.
And that's what ends up, we can kind of tell that something's going to happen to the Arn character, the way that he's just way too sweet. There's no way this character could live. He's knocked over by a huge
falling branch.
Ponderosa branch. What do you think it is? It's supposed to be a Ponderosa?
A big pine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's a big part of the book. The fact that these beautiful forests are quickly replaced by just sort of junk pine, but it's hard to say exactly what tree it is. Yeah.
Arn gets hit by this thing, and you can kind of tell fairly quickly that something's not right with him. He's starting to have visions and hallucinating, and maybe has
he sees his brother and his
significant brain injury.
He's glitching.
Yeah, he's glitching. And here's what our friend Matt had to say about his final moments in this movie.
The scene in which William H. Macy's character was dying and laying back against a tree and listening and talking about how everything was beautiful. It in itself is pretty stunning, but it was also one of the few moments in the film where there wasn't music, where we were actually hearing the birds chirping. And I thought that was the absence of music at that point became really powerful.
I think that the music tended to be quite present in the movie, maybe even a little bit more than I would have wanted, but that was a good note from...
I felt like there were 2 or 3 other moments of quiet that I really appreciated, though. Yeah.
And the thing that I was mentioning earlier where it goes like completely silent.
Yes.
Almost, and when those are matched with shots that almost could be like first person or something, like you're looking through Robert's eyes up at a stand of trees and it's completely silent because his mind is elsewhere.
Right, yeah.
This one has a little bit of the bird song because we're looking at basically Robert holds vigil for days with Arn's character as he slowly dies. Like he dies over the course of, seems like it might be a few days. And it's almost like I could imagine the shot through Arn's own eyes being like similar to the shot after, in other parts of the film of just looking up at the splendor of things and knowing that
shot straight up a tree is just beautiful. Yeah.
Another kind of elder logger, Billy, eulogizes Arn in a way that I do think may have come from the novella, but I look forward to your interpretation of this, Jess. He says, Arn said, a tree is a friend if you let it alone, but the second you put your blade in, you're in a war and the tree is a killer. I do think that's more or less taken from...
It's one of those things that I think, instead of being what Robert hears, we're seeing, or what he says, it just are those things that are said to him that mean something.
Yes.
Which is a really cool technique for creating depth out of a character who, doesn't have to say much.
He gets to soak up meaning that's come from other characters. And then on the train ride home following Arn's death, this is maybe 45 minutes into the movie, you can immediately tell that this is the point that something's not right. He looks out, I think he's napping and he looks out the window and sees that there's a fire that has taken over this area in North Idaho where he lives. We then see him attempt to find his family. And of course he doesn't. This is the most actually devastating thing that happens in the movie. And the way that it plays out in the movie, I would say it was super similar for me to the book in that I just kept hoping page after page. I was almost tempted to skip ahead. And if I had been watching this movie at home, I would have been fast forwarding when does he find him? Right. This is unacceptable.
Yes.
It's just way too much to contemplate.
Yeah.
But then I think that the topic, what I would like to do, if it's okay, is use this feedback we got from a person named Sunny, who talked about the impact of fires on her family that were around that time period.
It really sparked me with my dad just passing at 86. It's looking back in 1939. When they got led off to logging camps. My grandmother was a logger in 1910 fire. I mean, it really gripped me just to see the beginning to the end. I mean, I personally saw a lot of vision in my own family that survived the 1910 fires and were subject to the change in technology up at Bonners Ferry, building the railroads, logging after the 1910 fire. And probably the biggest scene for me was at the fire overlook. Yeah. Because my dad was the fire overlook during his senior in seminar.
No, I totally agree. In fact, I found myself thinking, that's really the 1910 fire, not 1922 or whatever year it's supposed to be, because that did destroy that entire towns were lost, and the sort of matter of factness of no, they're not coming back, you know. But again, that's what I love about the sort of timelessness is, we're not watching a documentary, and so taking those forest fires happen and they swarm through regions that way.
They're emblematic of the region. And so by picking and choosing, regardless of when they happen, putting them on a timeline of a person's life, you get that person then becomes sort of an avatar for.
And another way to show how many eras of one human life can you can live through a time when a fire like that, is, can just end your wife's life. It's so heartbreaking. The one thing that I wish they were able to do was really show a burned out area though. Because it is it's just a landscape that is, you could drive out I-90 and see, and that's now, like, those fires were all consuming. And so that would have been almost impossible to do, certainly in the time. But I wanted to feel that more, that sense that the world has burned up.
It's the most difficult production challenge they must have faced.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And when reading it, by the way, on the page, I had the same thought of like, this dude's dead. There's no way he's going to survive what he's doing. The smoke inhalation would have just destroyed him. Yeah. I felt that way reading it, to be clear. So when I saw it, I felt the same way. And I was like, well, whatever.
You run into it. The other thing is those fires aren't the way they might be now, a thing that takes a day or two. They did sometimes burn for weeks.
Yeah, totally. I want to get to our feedback from our friend Jacqueline about the kind of depiction of grief that follows when he realizes he can't find Gladys and Kate.
When he laid down at the site where the house was after it burned down and the rain just came and he just slept with the rain on him. I too thought about I was thinking about my dad because he's a manual laborer and has been most of his life. And I just think about how his body is just broken. And it's this film about how these industries have just kind of used these people up and tossed them aside, and they have to make do in whatever way that they can.
Yeah, so true.
The only moment the character, I think, raises his voice in the entire movie is to say, don't you think it's too much? How did they deserve that? Why? Yeah. And he screams, why? And that's the only moment he really raises his voice, basically above a whisper. Or
And it's a vision. He's speaking to the Chinese worker. Over across a fire that he's sitting at. Yeah, there's a hard cut to black. We open back up on Robert and he's in the ashes. And it's another one of those scenes that Luke was describing earlier of quiet. It's also one of the few times that Adolfo Veloso uses a zoom lens. Starts on a wide and it just pulls back to reveal Robert, and he's gone through the ashes of where his home used to be, and he's clutching something nondescript, and he's just shaking his head. I think it's the uncertainty here works as well in the movie as it does in the book of, again, I just really wanted to know, this can't be true. This cannot be happening. It's so devastating. Yeah. He searches for 2 weeks, can't find them. And then it says he went back to his acre to wait for their return. Yeah. A bear walks through. Yeah. And then you're just kind of like, this is becoming a very, very different movie, like instantaneously.
Yeah. I suppose that's the danger of showing up having read the source material is that shift when you're expecting it. It's just, how are they going to pull that off? And I thought the emotion by that time, I thought, again, a great performance by Joel Edgerton because it's so restrained. And then when it's not, you really feel it. So.
Eventually, Robert goes back to a life of logging, but it's obviously quite different. And you can kind of see that there's this passage of time where he's not the same.
He's much chainsaws now too.
And again, because they don't show us timestamps of there's no titles to introduce what's happened here. It's clear that quite a bit of time has passed and he is no longer the same person he was. There's a great moment where he runs into Billy, who is, we think, becoming senile because he doesn't recognize him.
But they were sitting by the fire and he started to understand that he was struggling with memory. And then the tying of his shoes at the ends, I thought was really beautiful.
So Robert basically helps Billy tie his own shoes because he can't quite get down anymore like that.
Which echoes the boots, nailed to the tree, which have been absorbed by now. So no, it was those moments of subtlety are just everything for me. Yeah.
I said this to Ginger when she made that comment after the movie. I was just like, this movie's telling you that you're either eventually going to struggle to tie your own boots, or you're going to die and then your boots will end up tacked into a tree and fossilized. And that's kind of like the trajectory of life that's available to most of these men in the name of expansionism and progress.
Well, it's, and all of us too. I mean, I think that's the thing is mortality is a really wild thing to capture in a film. And this does it in such a way that you watch it wear on this character's face and in his life. And even the greatest tragedy of his life gets lost in kind of the shuffle of memories, so that his daughter is now in that land of memories that is unloosed from chronology and can just show up anytime. So beautiful.
And I hadn't really thought about this until just now, but this is the moment when he decides to stop being a logger. Right. It's not because his family got eradicated in this fire or any other thing. It's when he realizes, so Billy has basically taken on the William H. Macy role, the Arn role, where he's not good for much of anything, except he says something like watering the steam mule, like the tractor they used
watering and greasing the steam mule.
The steam mule. And there's a scene right after that of where Robert doesn't even know how to operate a chainsaw.
Right.
So, and it's a moment where you have to infer what is in his head. But he's like, I can't go the Arn route or the Billy route because I'm no good with any of this stuff. I just got to find something else.
Right.
Yeah. And that's when he basically becomes like a day laborer.
Yeah. A gig worker.
He becomes basically a gig worker.
He becomes a gig worker. It's a great line in the narration where you're like, oh, it's again becoming a different movie. And with that, Granier was finished as a logger.
Yep.
And he ends up being kind of like, we kept making the joke, like he's a Postmates, DoorDash, like Amazon delivery
Uber,
driver. Yeah,
with quarter horses. Yeah.
Yes. And then he meets this character, Claire, who's introduced. And Jess pointed out early on that when she's introduced, she has a history in Montana. And the Robert character is like, I've never been to Montana. It's like the narrator at the beginning said that he had been to Montana, whatever.
Right.
You know, I think the second time I watched the movie, I bumped on that character quite a bit. But then I think when I thought about, oh, this is actually the 1940s now or whatever.
She's dressed like Jack Kerouac, basically.
It's still a tough, you're still making an exception because that Forest Service job typically was not a woman out in the woods by herself.
Right.
And in the novel, it's a widow who wants to marry Robert briefly.
Yeah.
And so again, that I totally understand the reason for that leap but it feels again like a small moment of 21st century wish fulfillment kind of edged in. Still, I think to be able to go up in that platform where you're overlooking the whole forest, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Even though it was one of those moments that I bristled just a little bit.
Yeah.
They have the cup of fireweed tea up in the lookout, and it feels a little HGTV to me. She's for some reason reading her letter of recommendation for the job. I didn't quite understand what was going on there.
There is one moment where this is like right after he's had a fever dream and he's walking in like snow, and then it cuts. It almost like it's like he's taking the journey, but when it cuts to him showing up at the fire lookout, it's spring.
Right.
So it's a way it felt to me a lot like this is the way they're treating memory.
And I think these are the passages, just my point of view, the least sure-footed of the movie. He also does in this section of the movie have his breakdown where he confesses to Claire what happened to his family. And she says, oh, the same thing happened to me. You're
carrying all this stuff inside and then you just tell this, person in this lookout.
Yeah.
So by that point, you have it so deeply ingrained in you because you've watched this film that it wasn't a moment of therapy, but it was a moment really outside his character.
Yeah.
And I understand why it happens. You've got these actors, they've got to do something.
Yeah. It took me out a little bit. And I thought
you can't have them making soup all day long.
Right.
Or thank God they didn't fall in love and do that.
Right.
That would have been unforgivable. We get to the end of the storytelling and he gets to visit our town of Spokane, Washington. Yeah. Shout out Spokane. This is where we get all our pride. And we get to see some buildings in Spokane, which this was really, really cool. It was such a treat. We see the steam plant. We see what's now our newspaper, the Spokesman, their building.
The Review Tower was there always. It was always the newspaper building.
So. And the Davenport, which, for our Spokane audience, if you haven't been to our local museum, the MAC, they have an exhibit about the Davenport. So you see the Davenport. This is where you get to see that real trajectory of this man's life that is probably still at this point in the story, which is supposed to be the 1950s,
60s, I guess.
50s, maybe early 60s.
Well, I think
there's an Apollo landing, I think.
No,
happening.
I think he's watching the first man to orbit the Earth, John Glenn.
John Glenn.
So
okay.
I think it's like 59,
yep.
Okay.
60, 61.
Yeah,
I don't think
early 60s. Yeah.
Late 50s, early 60s.
And the person he asks what it even is.
61, I think, is when John Glenn.
Just really quickly, the person, and you only see her reflected in the store window where he's watching the TV from on the sidewalk, is an Asian woman in like a pillbox hat, sort of like an Asian Jackie O look.
What is that fella doing?
He's in outer space.
It struck me as that's like a nice little bookend for the character of the Chinese
guy. That's a great point. Yeah.
He's like, she's like, he's in outer space and that's us. He goes to the Empire Theater. These are what's interesting about this section, this is where I really want to chat with you, Jess, before you leave. the depiction of the Wolf Boy character, again, they didn't really do the wolf thing, but this makes the wolf girl thing even harder to understand in the movie. And I'm not sure if they should have even included it, but in the novella, the very last pages is of the Wolf Boy character that's in the Empire Theater. He's seeing this performance, and it's kind of there's like a carnival barker aspect to it of come see this crazy character, Wolf Boy.
Another thing that felt more like the 1900s, the carnival barker and the vaudeville thing.
Right. And again, you have to give into the impressionism of he's going to do with time what he wants, because the logging we see is 1800s logging. They're carrying axes. The steam logging is actually when he should have been a logger. That should have been at the very beginning, So, but again, you set all that aside, and again, we're watching we've seen an entire character's life. And so this is what registered for him. So somewhere seeing that Wolf Boy connected with the fact that his daughter was gone, these things combine in a way in his solitude and his aging that make him think maybe that's what his daughter is now. So to have them out of sequence like that was a little bit odd, but also they can happen in any sequence in the film too, because by this point it's the nature of memory. Yeah, we're unloosed from chronology, and I so appreciated that. And again, that's when I finished the movie the same way when I finished the novella. I felt in that soupy place of thinking of my own memories and my grandfather and my dad. And I thought it just put you exactly in that place that you want to be in.
Yeah, all the material's there, all the story beats. The plots are different, but I think all the same big juicy beats are there. He goes up into a biplane, also happens in the novella. And I think they showed that he was in the novella, he was discovered by some hikers in 1968. But his body had ostensibly decomposed and probably had some shit growing through it. I could imagine vegetation growing up around a dead body laying in this cabin.
Like the boots again.
Like the boots. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to read the last two lines.
Yes, please do.
And this is Robert's end. And suddenly it all went black, and that time was gone forever. Now there's two things happening here. That time, and again, Denis Johnson's hearing about this loner who lives in the woods, and that time was gone forever. But also time is gone forever. Time is this thing that only exists to us while we're experiencing it.
Right.
And so that note at the end of the novel echoed for me in what I saw. But I thought that one of the things I missed was the elegance of that simple line. Yeah. And it's a poet's line. It's really poet's line. Beautifully put in. That time was
Johnson
gone
wrote
forever.
a decent amount of poetry.
Yeah, he was a poet first. And then and so that's, I think, why the spare quality of his work, of his fiction. I also brought my favorite of his books, Jesus' Son, which is also super slender and just these incredible short stories.
Shorts. Okay.
Yeah, that are just they're almost the opposite of this, except in their simplicity and their minimalism. Some beautiful stories and so funny, and a great film too. You should go see Jesus' Son. Billy Crudup, Jack Black.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah.
Jess, do you have anything else you want to add? Because we're going to wrap this podcast up without you. You've got to go because you have some other things to do.
I have a phone meeting, as a matter of fact. I so appreciated this. It was I could not think of film I'd rather talk about, and as someone who has had to adapt my own stuff or have my stuff adapted, it was so fascinating to watch that. And I've long found a way to separate them in my mind when it's my work or when it's a book I love. But this was an especially interesting experiment because I came away loving both in their own way and again, appreciating that the mood, the feeling, the emotion that I got out of the book, I got out of this film in spite of the very differences. So I thought it was, it's one of the great movies I've seen this year. I saw Blue Moon, which I loved also. So right now, those are my two favorite movies, which is saying a lot because I think I've seen 7. Yeah. Well, so
thanks so much, man.
Yeah. Thanks, fellas.
Jess, thank you so much. We so appreciate your time. And we'll have you back on for a movie in the future.
Hopefully one of mine.
Yes. Let's go.
Please.
Well, that was totally incredible.
It was.
I can't thank Jess enough for hanging out with us for an hour and a half and chatting about this movie.
So much fun.
Yeah. Let's get a couple more pieces of feedback from our friends that came and watched the movie with us to just give our sort of where do we find the movie Train Dreams in the moment, aka the moment we're all living in. Yeah. And so we'll start with some feedback from our audience, starting with Matt.
I liked it a lot. I thought it was interesting because it was a very slow film that never stopped moving. Right? Like it was slow, but it was always like the swirl. Like we were always kind of going. It's like, what's that? Shepherd's tone? Is that weird sound effect that Christopher Nolan always uses in his films? It just seemed like it's always going up, but it's always actually just staying the same. Yeah, and just the editing and the cinematography. I mean, it was really fascinating. I kept on watching it, thinking like there weren't really sections or parts. It all flowed together. Right. And it just, that's what I'm getting at. Like it was constantly swirling around.
Because they never really established a timeline. Instead of having like 1918 on the screen or anything, it was just like time passes. And like occasionally you can tell that a year passes because the snow happens. Except because you never really establish yourself in time, somehow that really adds to that swirl effect. Everything just keeps going in like an endless gyre of existence. I was really struggling with, just tell me what year it is. Like I just need to know what's happening, but also I appreciated the effect that not knowing where we were actually gave.
This was something that was shared with me by somebody who listened to a Clint Bentley interview at a screening. He said that they shot it the way they did because they wanted it to look like a postcard, because they wanted it to feel more like a memory than a record of someone's life. And then I saw an interview with Adolfo Veloso saying almost identically the same thing. Yeah. And to me, this was kind of the Tarkovsky moment, his film, The Mirror. And I think the feedback from our audience really like shows that if that was Bentley's vision for this, then it was, and especially after our conversation with Jess, and he was really successful. Yeah.
This is where the episodic structure, nature of the film, sort of putting it all together. There are moments where the narrative is pretty clear, right? When he's at the logging camp, that more or less happens chronologically. Then there are all these other stretches of the film that really are, those are impressionistic, but kind of roughly chronological. And it gets more intense as it goes. Like his life gets more impressionistic and more sort of steeped in memory, the less he has in his life, right? Yeah, he gets more sucked into memory, the less he has around him, you know?
I think that the movie shows that Grenier is living a life where capitalism requires him to hurt the planet and himself, and the eras of technology that Grenier was experienced. And our audience had a couple different comments about that I thought were really interesting. We'll start with our friend Jacqueline.
I actually cried a few times in the film. There's just so much grief. I mean, it's such a grief-laden story. Obviously, it ends with like some bit of sweetness, but he loses so much. It's such a stark contrast to Mastermind, James Mooney's character, where he's just like floating in space with no connection to Earth and no emotional depth at all, like no emotions and no care for his family. And this man is like opposite end of the spectrum, like is so in love with life and his people.
We talked about how Grenier is like the anti-Joseph Campbell hero's journey.
Right. He's
as
not
a
acting
character
in the world. Yeah.
No. And this Mooney character that she's talking about from Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind, our previous episode of the podcast, everyone check that out, is this person who does just constantly want to have this hero's journey. But hero's journeys sometimes are filled with people doing terrible things.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really interesting thing about the notion of it being good enough to just exist, to just be, and to not feel like you have to imprint and encode the planet with every waking hour of your life.
Well, and the Mooney character is somebody who comes from such privilege. He's trying to inject adventure into what could be a life of pretty easy existence.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, this Grenier lives a life that is so hard in a place and time where, merely just eking by is almost impossible. All he wants to do is exist, and he can't even really, in the way that he wants to with this family that he raises and loves and spends all of his time on this land, he's never able to do that.
He would have been totally satiated with almost just subsistence, just enough to have a roof and some time to spend with his family. And even that was impossibly difficult during that time period. I wanted to, if it's okay, I want to end with this quote from this man who we met at the screening who worked on the film. And his name is Jungle Cat. And we really appreciated his feedback. And he had a ton of stories that at some point I'll probably want to explore on this podcast. But for this episode, he said something that I just think really wraps a bow on the topic of this movie.
The amount of talent that was involved in it was really surprising for me to witness it. They actually had to get out and hump it out to get what they needed to capture. And Adolfo did an incredible job of that. There's not a lot of films out there that are like this one.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like Cowboys and Indians. And I was really proud to be with the people out of Spokane here because they took extra effort in all their steps of what they were doing just because they wanted it that bad.
Yeah.
They were that hungry to get film here, you know. And I think it's going to be neat for all of this region to have it, you know, to be proud of it.
I just love that he talks about two things in that section. And he's got, his thoughts were all over the place and he gave us a lot of them.
You condensed 5 minutes into 30 seconds.
Yeah, 5 minutes into a minute. But the two things that really occurred to me is talking about this area should be proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so true. And also that the notion of how much labor goes into filmmaking. I don't think a lot of people realize that, how much hard work it is. So to all of our local filmmaker friends that worked on this movie, shout out to you. You should be very proud of it. It's an extraordinarily beautiful film. And I think its imperfections are what I might even like most about it.
Well, because memory is imperfect too. One of the, I hadn't thought about this in the context of what he said to us a week ago when we watched the movie, but this is what he's saying about it's just a normal, he said personality. He meant like just a logger like him because he has a background in logging.
Yep.
Back then, this is where it's like, this is kind of the anti-Forrest Gump because this character lives through so much history, but unlike Forrest Gump, when he gets sort of carried along, you know, through, you know, all the 60s and 70s and stuff, Robert is basically left to live in an area that was completely forgotten by modernity, extracted from, but then the modernity happened elsewhere, whether it was down in Spokane or down in the rest of the world that lumber built. And that is so much truer to the life of like your average laborer, right? You never get to see the fruits of, when you're cutting trees in a stand in the middle of North Idaho, you don't see the fruits of that labor, maybe ever. As a guy who, I just love the history of this area so much, it's made me think about, what this is kind of, and I'm not trying to cast this as like a pejorative or all, like if Forrest Gump were in North Idaho, it would very much be the life of Robert Grainer. He would not have the opportunities to see the world that the Gump character does.
Yeah. And like, I think that this movie is something that Spokane should be really proud of.
Yeah.
I'm super stoked that this was made here.
Yeah.
I'm stoked that the movie turned out as good as it was. I love it for its imperfections. And it makes me think deeply about how we have our public life that sometimes rips us away from our private life.
Yeah.
And it's just a never ending battle with trying to fight that as people and to try to have, you know, the joy that you get in your life and the diminishing returns of accumulation and materialism, right? Yeah. It's like a great movie to show you like Grainer needed jack shit to be happy, but he had to go do this horrible thing to even have jack shit.
Yeah. It's so fascinating that this in a lot of ways, you know, it's Vision Quest and Benny and June and all the big productions that have happened here over the years. Like those are all movies that are trying to say something about, you know, in the adolescence or, you know, this in some ways is the smallest aperture, like a single man's life, a logger, somebody. There were thousands of these guys across northeastern Washington, the Panhandle, Montana, thousands upon thousands of them, none of whom have had stories written about them. In some ways, in terms really of smart. Not talking about quality exactly, but this is in some ways the most ambitious film I think that's been filmed here in terms of what it's trying to say about the nature of human existence and then placing it so perfectly and specifically in our area. It's one of the first times in my life as a guy who's spent a lot of time writing about arts and culture and wishing we got more bands coming through town and wishing there were more movies here. I wonder if this is what it feels like to take for granted how many films are shot in New York or LA. Like, it's like, this feels like a story that was made for me. And I love that about it.
I love that about it. And I do want to shout out every one of the people at the, you know, the kind of the producer level that made this movie here. Everything I've heard about this production is that they tried to put $40 million into what was probably a $15 million movie. They really, really deeply cared and put so much thought and attention into every detail that went into it.
It's awesome.
And I think it shows. So that's going to do it for this episode of All Those Moments. Thank you so much for joining us, Jess Walter. Thank you to our friends at the Magic Lantern. Luke and I are going to take a break after this episode. It's our 10th. We're going to reload for the new year.
Season 2 coming up.
We're going to call it season 2. We'll keep up with some updates and content on our Instagram page. So be sure to follow us there. Of course, also follow us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast served up to you. And be sure to not just check us out there, but follow, subscribe, like, share. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Benji.
Thank you, Luke.